Hi, this is Jeff Blauette, Technical Agronomist for Cooperative Farmers Elevator. And on this week's Field Friday, thought we'd talk about a little trial we have going on. A lot of you guys probably realize we're doing a lot of trial work every year. We do a lot of agronomic trials and hybrid and variety testing, of course, too. But we're doing a little different trial this year, and I thought we'd touch on it. It's actually something we have in the ground already. I know there's very little planted anywhere. But we actually do have some planted, and believe it or not, this is beans. If some of you guys follow us on social media, we posted a picture and a little video last week when we planted this, but this is a no-till bean field that was planted last Friday, 26th of April. And we've got some stuff going on here that's kind of interesting. The buzz in the industry this last year or two has kind of been talking about early bean planting and also lower populations possibly being as profitable or more profitable than anything. So we thought we'd kind of put that to the test. We didn't get it quite planted as early as we had hoped, but we wanted to get something in really early, as early as we could. So we still got it in April, which is, you know, earlier than most guys will plant beans, and that's okay. But we've got a early and a late maturity. We've got a 1.7 and a 2.4 maturity soybean here. We've got 3 populations, and we've got 3 replications of all of this. And the interesting thing about this trial is we're going to talk about, you know, as the summer goes on, we'll probably revisit it, but we planted it for 26th of April. We're going to plant the exact same trial out here right next to this, probably in 3 weeks or sometime around the middle to the 3rd week of May, maybe, depending on the weather. So we'll have all the exact same populations and varieties out here with just a different planting date. So it'll be interesting to see what we learn there. So what do we have going on out here? If we look at the soil temperature today, we're in the middle of the afternoon. It's under the residue here. It's about 43 and a half. Soybeans, generally the ideal germination temperature is in the mid 70s, but they'll germinate slowly and progress at 50 degrees. We probably haven't been 50 degrees out here since we planted. We planted these on Friday night, and that Saturday overnight we had several inches of snow and slush on top of this, probably within 12 hours. So that's probably the worst thing we can do to a seed is put it in the ground and have it take a cold drink of water right away. We talk about with corn, that cold imbibition damage that the corn can get. So we'll see what we learn on soybeans with that. If we dig some of these up and we look at some of these beans, if you look at what we have here, you can see some of these are just starting to show a sprout, a little bit of development. If we look at these that are split, you can kind of see there is a little bit of a, you know, a shoot coming. We don't really have a radical root showing up yet, but we do have a little bit of development here, which is, to be a little bit honest, it's really surprising to me. I didn't think there'd be anything more than swelled up, but it'll be interesting to see what this looks like here. If we do get a few days of sunshine, we probably will see some of these beans popping up in the next week if we get, you know, some 60, 70 degree weather with some sun, which has been hard to come by, obviously. But the other thing we got going on out here that we'll look at here later this year is we won't be able to take it to yield specifically, but we've got 3 rows. We used a plant growth regulator that we've been playing with as a seed treatment called Ascend. Ascend has a plant growth regulator, gibberellic acid in it that really should help early season development when that plant's really starting to, or when that seed's starting to germinate and develop. It should spur that on. So we'll see if that shows up here. We've had some pretty good results with Ascend in yield data in previous years, but not specifically around early development benefits. So we'll see maybe in a few weeks if there's something that we can show you. We might revisit that on a video. But with the weather forecast and with the weather conditions and the soil conditions we've had, it seems kind of crazy, but there is some reason to consider this planting beans first concept. With these soil conditions being as cool as they are and damp as they are, maybe we can get by with some of the sins on planting some beans first, because we don't need to have as even an emergence with soybeans as we do with corn, and we can plant them shallower and where it's not quite as damp. And some of the reasons we always wanted to get the corn planted is we wanted to get that pollination period done earlier in the past, so we could get that done before the statistically driest and hottest period of the year, which is late July. It's been a lot of years since we've really seen that hurt anything. We've had some periods go through where we probably would have expected some stress from pollination, some hot, dry weather, and it hasn't really hurt us. I think we've had some advancements in development of the genetics over time where we've got a lot more heat and drought tolerance to, thwart some of those stresses that have hurt corn. So if that's not hurting our corn yields by planting a little later, we know having a lesser stand, an uneven stand is gonna hurt corn. Even today, that still is a factor. So beans can take that uneven stand and uneven emergence. We've seen beans more and more being tested at lower populations and not hurting anything, so that does fit into this. And corn, we know planting it, if we can get it all out of the ground in 24 hours, that's the best yielding stand we can have. So it might be something to consider on some acres this year if we continue to sit on our hands and we can't go in these cornfields and we're worried about that. Maybe it's something to consider to try at least a little just to see. We're testing it here to see what we can learn for you guys too. But we'll see what we learn here. We'll probably revisit this a few times this summer and maybe even later on this spring and see if there's anything to show you, or some of the other trials that we'll be putting in later, we'll be testing some things. So with that, that's this week's Field Friday, and we'll see you next week.